I'm sort of testing the limits of YouTube with this one. This is a poem by John Donne written in the 1600s. So it's really old, but as you'll see, it's really quite bawdy, B-A-W-D-Y. It's not explicit, but it's very suggestive. And I think you might be shocked by how suggestive it is. And I think that tells us something about our time. We like to think that we're so much more liberated than people of the past, but really, in a lot of ways, we're quite prudish. So let's get started. This is To His Mistress Going to Bed by John Donne. Come, madam, come, all rest my powers defy. So the speaker in this poem is talking to his mistress while they're going to bed, and he's telling his mistress to come to bed with him. All rest my powers defy. So he can't rest, the speaker can't rest, and neither will he let the mistress rest. Neither of us will rest, he's saying. Until I labor, I in labor lie. So let's try to break this line down. I in labor lie. The speaker is saying, I am like someone in labor, in pain, in agony, until I labor, until I plow a field, until I get it on. You can sort of guess where the speaker's going with this, what he means by laboring. The foe, oft times having the foe in sight, is tired with standing, though he never fight. So this is a very evocative picture. We can imagine a duelist, a combatant who sees his opponent but isn't allowed to fight, so is tired of just standing in wait and not being allowed to go fight. But of course, the speaker's not really talking about two combatants, two fighters. He's talking about something else. What would be something that would be tired of standing up if it never gets to fight? Well, it's something standing up. It's an erection. All right, there I said it. So that's about as explicit as I will be in reading this poem. But really, that is what's evinced in this line. Off with that girdle, like heaven's zone glistering, but a far fairer world encompassing. Now the speaker's telling the mistress, take off the girdle, right? It's not that there's anything wrong with this girdle. In fact, it's glistering. It's quite nice as far as girdles go. A girdle is a belt. But he wants it off, of course, because underneath this girdle is something far better, right? A far fairer world. And this comparison, there's some irony here in that we expect the heavens that girdle the earth to be fairer than the world itself, than the earth. But in this case, making the comparison, the speaker is saying what's underneath the girdle is far fairer, and that's what he wants to see. Unpin that spangled breastplate which you wear, that the eyes of busy fools may be stopped there. So continuing on with this idea of disrobing, taking off the mistress's clothes, asking her to take them off, take off the spangled breastplate. Again, it's spangled, it's kind of spectacular, it's colorful, so there's nothing wrong with it except that it covers up what the speaker wants to see underneath. And he's contrasting himself with the busy fools, right? Other people, those fools, they're stopped at the spangled breastplate and they admire the breastplate and they don't know to go beyond it. And what's beyond really is what's worth admiring. Unlace yourself, For that harmonious chime tells me from you that now it is bedtime. So continue to disrobe, because I hear this harmonious chime that tells me, it comes from you, the mistress, and it tells me, the speaker, that now it's bedtime. What is the chime? Perhaps it's the sounds of unlacing, perhaps it's the mistress's voice. Whatever it is, it's an indication that now's the time. Off with that happy busk which I envy, that still can be and still can stand so nigh. A busk is the front part of a corset, so the speaker is still telling the mistress to disrobe, to take this off, but he envies this busk because it's so close to the mistress, and yet it has the power to remain still. It's not trembling with impatience, with anticipation as the speaker is. The speaker can't help but be agitated, especially if he's close to the mistress. Your gown going off such beauteous state reveals, as when from flowery meads the hill's shadow steals. So now the gown's coming off and it reveals the beauteous state beneath it. And the comparison here is with the shadow lifting from a flowery meadow. The hill's shadow is lifting away and reveals the beauteous state that it once covered. Off with that wiry coronet, and show the hairy diadem which on you doth grow. The speaker is talking about a coronet, a crown that he wants the mistress to relieve herself of. And underneath this crown is a hairy diadem. Another kind of crown, but it's the natural crown of hair that grows on the mistress. And we can imagine that the speaker is talking about some kind of headdress that the mistress might be wearing, but there's also another part of the body that could be described as a hairy diadem, so you can let your imagination run wild there as to what that might suggest. Now off with those shoes, and then safely tread in this love's hallowed temple, this soft bed. So take off your shoes. We're on holy ground here. The bed is holy ground. So it's a little bit sacrilegious, but the speaker is suggesting that we're about to partake in, we're about to indulge in something holy. In such white robes heaven's angels used to be received by men. Thou, angel, bringst with thee a heaven like Muhammad's paradise. Again, somewhat sacrilegious, but the speaker's telling his mistress, you resemble an angel in your white robe, you bring heaven down with you. We hear perhaps some Islamophobic conceptions about what heaven is like in Islam. And though ill spirits walk in white, we easily know by this these angels from an evil sprite. What is the speaker saying here? He's asking us to consider this conundrum. Angels appear in white, but so do ill spirits, ghosts, right? How do we differentiate between an angel and an ill spirit if both are attired in white? Well, it's very easy, the speaker says. Those, the ill spirits, set our hairs, but these angels set our flesh upright. A ghost, an ill spirit, gives us goosebumps, and our hair is set upright. And angels like the speaker's mistress, set our flesh upright. And you can very easily imagine what the speaker is talking about there. Just pause to consider it, and it'll come to mind what exactly is being suggested by flesh upright. License my roving hands and let them go before, behind, between, above, below. The speaker is asking the mistress for permission to let his hands roam, to rove. And this is a very familiar trope to us. I think the body, the mistress's body, is a kind of wonderland, and the speaker wants permission to explore it. Right? I think Donne's poem is perhaps a much more masterful use of this trope, but again, it's a familiar trope. Oh, my America, my newfound land, my kingdom, safeliest when with one man manned, my mine of precious stones, my ampury, how blessed am I in this discovering thee. So the speaker is an explorer, is a discoverer of this newfound land, this new world, namely the mistress's body. And there's irony here in this comparison again, in that if she's a kingdom, if her body's a kingdom, well, it's safest when it's only manned with one man, right? You wouldn't want many men guarding the safety of this kingdom. You only want one man, namely the speaker. The speaker is going to be the only man manning the kingdom. To enter in these bonds is to be free. Here's another ironic comparison. The speaker is saying the bonds of love are freedom. Right? They're not constricting, rather they're freeing. Then where my hand is set, my seal shall be. Remember that the speaker's asked permission to roam around with his hands, and we can imagine where his hand is going to be set. There his seal shall be as well. A seal on a letter is what encloses the letter, what signifies the authenticity of the letter. So perhaps it's representing some other part of the speaker as well. Full nakedness, all joys are due to thee, as souls unbodied, bodies unclothed must be, to taste whole joys. And now the speaker is moving into a more philosophical register. He's singing the praises of nakedness, so this is an ode to full nakedness, but he's also drawing the comparison between bodies and souls. So souls need to be unbodied, souls need to move beyond the bodily realm in order to experience whole joys, and in the same way, bodies need to shed their external coverings. They need to be unclothed in order to taste whole joys. Gems which you women use are like Atlanta's balls, cast in men's views. And here the speaker is making reference to Atlanta, a figure in Greek myth who doesn't want to get married, and so she challenges all her suitors to a foot race, and with the promise that if they beat her in the foot race, then they'll be allowed to marry her. The problem is Aphrodite intervenes and gives one of the suitors these golden apples that he tosses on the ground, and Atlanta's distracted by these golden apples. So these are Atlanta's balls that distract people from what their goal should be. Cast in men's views, that when a fool's eye lighteth on a gem, his earthly soul may covet theirs, not them. So these gems, these distractions are what fools latch onto, right? They lose sight of what's really valuable, what's really worth their admiration, and they're just distracted by these gems. Fools, right? These fools. The speaker is saying, I'm not a fool like them. Like pictures, or like books gay coverings made for laymen, are all women thus arrayed. So the speaker is making this comparison between women and these books, which have these fancy coverings, these fancy covers that are meant to entice laymen. Laymen are not clergy, not priests, right? People who don't deal with religious books all the time, and so they're enticed by these fancy coverings. But people who really know how to appreciate a book aren't distracted by the covers of the books, right? You don't judge a book by its cover, you judge a book by what's inside. And so the speaker's saying, I'm not like those laymen. I know what's really valuable. I know what's really worth considering. It's what's on the inside. It's not the clothing, it's what's underneath the clothing. Themselves are mystic books, which only we, whom their imputed grace will dignify, must see revealed. So themselves, the women are mystic books. They're religious books, they're sacred books, holy texts that need to be interpreted, but can only be interpreted by the grace that's given by the women themselves, right? We, whom their imputed grace will dignify, we few, we chosen, get to read, get to understand and interpret and enjoy these books. Then, since that I may know as liberally as to a midwife, show thyself. So the speaker is saying, I want to know, I want to see everything. And so, mistress, he's saying to his mistress, show yourself as liberally as to a midwife. There's no sense in hiding anything, there's no sense in hiding behind anything. Cast all, yea, this white linen hence, there is no penance due to innocence. The speaker's making the argument that there's nothing to be ashamed of, right? Nakedness is innocence, as a newborn is born naked and is entirely innocent. So your nakedness will also be innocent. There's no penance due to nakedness, to the innocence of nakedness. To teach thee I am naked first, why then what needst thou have more covering than a man? And here again, there's some religious resonance, some irreligious resonance, but most of all, this last couplet, like most of the poem, it's playful.